This is the farm that I run here in Holcomb with my family, my husband and our 2 boys. It's actually the farm that I grew up on. It was a dairy farm. My dad bought it when I was about 4 years old, and I grew up milking cows here in the old stone barn, and those were just the best memories that I have of my dad, were time spent in the barn together. But I remember I was in high school, and I think I had probably my whole life been thinking that's what I wanted to do, was grow up and, take over the farm. And we were in the milk house. We were washing the milkers. And Dad, I remember, was leaning against the pipeline, and he's like, I just don't think there's a future in this for you. The way that dairy farming is going in Wisconsin, it's really hard. And a big contributing factor to that is the monopolization in agriculture. And that, for me, having been at this for over a decade with him, was kind of soul crushing. That's what I really wanted to do in life. That's how I always envisioned raising my kids. But I think the realities are that, here in Wisconsin, we're losing a dairy farm a day, and we have some real changes that we need to make.
When I was young, a lot of the farms were, maybe 200 acres. There were homesteads all over the place dotting the countryside, and everyone had neighbors. More and more of those farms are disappearing completely. Those farms are being bought up. A lot of the houses are being raised and plowed over so that larger and larger farms can move in.
There's a concentration crisis in America. We've seen the collapse of a lot of family farms, first in hogs, and then we saw it in dairy, and now we're kind of seeing it in beef. What the term farmer means is kind of loosey-goosey at this point. I mean, you have the one that's been in a family for generations. They have a few hundred head of cattle. But then you have mega corporate farms where you have 35,000 dairy cows owned by one person. Now, is that person a farmer? I would say no. And those people exploit the positive association a lot of Americans have with the notion of being a farmer. They're the ones that get the most of the Farm Bill money. They're the ones that get most of the handouts. They're the ones that are prospering under this model. The question is do we want Bill Gates to be the largest owner of farmland in America? What kind of farming system do we want?
Starting a farm is an immense undertaking. You have to learn how to produce what you want to produce. You have to figure out how to be your own marketing agent. If you want to get into agriculture, not only are you looking at razor-thin margins, a massive amount of skills that you need to develop, but you're also looking at trying to compete against basically Wall Street.
70% of our produce comes from 3 states. In the meat industry, it's been really consolidated down to the big 4, they call them. There are 4 companies processing 85% of beef in the U.S. Throughout the pandemic, we saw beef prices in the store actually rising. Meanwhile, animals that I was shipping to market were bringing in less money.
Farmers have it the hardest. They're being both squeezed on the input and output side. So when they buy their seeds, when they buy their fertilizer, a lot of that's super concentrated, so they're paying monopoly prices for it. And then when they go to sell, they're selling to monopolies. So not only are they overpaying, but then they're getting underpaid.
Until we can figure out a way to create a system where farmers are getting fair payment for their goods, we're going to continue to lose family farms in Wisconsin.
How this concentrated economic power shows itself is in labeling. When you see a label made in the US, you think, I'm buying beef grown in the US. This monopoly power has basically corrupted the political system where they're able to take meat from Brazil and slap a made in the USA label on it. And so most people don't realize it.
Marketers out there have gotten really, really good at making labels look like they're from family farms. You're going to see great pictures of, farm scenes, and even the names of brands are really tied into, pasture and grazing and things like that, or words like natural that you don't actually even know the meaning of.
You're needing to help the consumer understand how you're different than what they're seeing on the grocery store shelves. And that can be really tricky because these large companies have whole teams of people who are marketing experts, and they know exactly what the consumer wants to hear. When you're really small, you don't have the same sway. You can't make the same negotiation with leasing a tractor for a very small amount of money. or buying feed in such large lots that you can negotiate discount pricing.
We're running into issues now with something we call right to repair. Through the years, our equipment has become so much more advanced and so much more technology involved. You have to have an equipment dealer technician come out and work on your equipment. That means that you also have to wait on that technician to be able to get out to you. So in some cases, it's actually held up harvests for people. The cost has been astronomical, and they have fewer options where to go for those parts. The current food system right now is not serving farmers well. It's not serving laborers along the supply chain well. Honestly, it's not serving our consumers well if it's not healthful food. And I think we are at this kind of fork in the road where we can make some decisions that will either restore some vibrancy to rural America, or we can continue down the path that we're on.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too with this moment is how cyclical it is. I mean, we've been here before. A lot of this monopoly talk started in agriculture. I mean, it started with farmers a century ago being angry about the railroad monopolies, shortchanging them, the slaughterhouses shortchanging them. I mean, the first antitrust laws in the world come from farmers organizing.
There was this massive amount of consolidation, and the people rose up and they said no more of this.
That's the hope here now, is for farmers to lead, because they've led before.
We're in that moment again, and we have this huge opportunity.
I mean, change is already starting. This past summer, President Biden announced a big monopoly executive order, ordering a bunch of different government agencies to look in concentration. You're seeing bipartisan support right now to address the concentration we're seeing in the beef markets. That is a big sign of hope.
Reach out to your legislators and demand some change, because I think we do need to get a little bit loud about this issue.
We have the laws we need on the books. We just need to be enforcing them.
A big step, I think, is really just educating ourselves as consumers. Join Farmers Union and pay attention to these issues, but also pay attention in the grocery store.
Buy from the local farmers. Work with your school district. I mean, it's one thing when I individually buy the right thing. Schools buy a lot of stuff. There's a lot of purchasing power. So, I mean, that's what I would encourage people to do, is really work with their local institutional buyers to buy the right thing. If we confront this problem, everyone kind of wins. From farmers to workers to the person who picks it, who processes it, who slaughters it, who transports it, who cooks it, who serves it. Guess what? They're in every congressional district in America.
I like to think that 10 or 15 years from now, I won't be sitting here in a position like my dad was, where he had to say that there wasn't a future on the farm. I want to be able to look my kids in the eye and say that they do have a chance to be farmers.